Welcome to Inquiry, presented by Peoria Proud. Our organization seeks to unify the community as a whole through advocacy, education, and social outreach. This series dives into topics that inform, inspire, and ignite community conversation. Let's get into it.
Chris, before we get into the details of this year's primary, can you start by giving us a overview of what the League of Women Voters does?
Sure. So as you said, I'm Chris Kaegard. I'm the president of the League of Women Voters. And the first thing I guess I would say about the League is that the name of the League is a legacy name.
Oh,
Of
okay.
it. It was formed during the women's suffrage movement early in the 1900s. And by virtue of that, it took its name from the fact that it was women who were seeking the right to vote. But for the last 50 years, the League has been open to everyone, regardless of gender identity, and continues to be. And we've had instances over the past 25, 30 years where there's been a man who's been president of the League rather than anybody of any other gender. So,
That was one of my questions, because when I got your email back, I was like, that's a man. Like, what's... At first I was like, what's this? Like,
yeah.
What's going on?
And that's a lot of people that they hi, I'm Chris, he, him, and well, what's that about with the name of the organization? So yes, we are open to everybody regardless of gender identity, age 16 and older. So we can have students in their upper high school years, and that's especially important as I take my first diversion from your question to note for everybody listening that in Illinois, if you are 17 years old before the primary, but you are going to be 18 by the time of the general election, you may register to vote and vote in the primary before you are 18 years old because primaries are designed to help winnow the field in a political party to the candidate that political party is going to have run in the general election. So the notion behind all of that is you can cast your vote in that party primary in March or whenever it is in Illinois each year, and then you are fully registered and able to vote for keeps in November when you actually elect the person to the office. So that's the first thing I want to get out there is more people can vote than may think they can vote. Number one. Number two, to your real question about what the League does, the League is an organization more than 100 years old that has different chapters or leagues around the country at the local level, at the state level, and at the federal level, all of which are activists for voter awareness, voter education, and voter access. We're nonpartisan, so we do not endorse or support candidates, but at the federal, the state, and the local levels, we take positions on issues.
Oh, okay.
Now, we do that after we've carefully researched those issues. We have to look at multiple sides of an issue, come to a consensus on what that position is going to be, and then we advocate for that position with elected leaders. We explain that position to members of the public. We make people aware of things related to those positions. And along the way, we also conduct in each election cycle voter registration drives, encouragement, get out the vote efforts. We did one in connection with the NAACP in Peoria ahead of the last election. And we also run every election cycle candidate forums where we extend an invitation to all of the candidates for a particular race, invite them to come for, typically it's an hour-long forum, open to the public, recorded, thrown up onto our YouTube page, live streamed, where we ask them questions related specifically to the office that they are running for.
Okay. You just reminded me of it. One of the first times I had ever seen the League of Women Voters was I was at the state fair, and it was a naturalization ceremony. And I stood there and watched because I'm like, well, this is like really interesting. Look at all these people becoming Americans. And, with so much political stuff happening sometimes it's hard to be proud to be from here. Stuff like, like that. And then just seeing like this huge line of people registering to vote, like literally the second they were able to.
Yeah.
It's
one of the most emotional, most heartening moments, because you've seen people who have come from somewhere else, and almost all of us have families that are from somewhere else that came here, seeing people who are walking in those same shoes we have, and the moment they become a citizen, we're able to help them register and have their voice heard for the very first time in the very next election. And I have to say, in Illinois, that has been conducted beautifully every time, in large part because the federal court system works with us. They conduct the naturalization ceremonies here, not any other federal agency, as is typically done in some other states around the country, some other jurisdictions. Federal courts do it here. They have worked very cooperatively with us over decades worth of time to make sure that we are provided space at any one of those locally. They can be done at the courthouse, at the library. Sometimes they're done in larger spaces. They've done it up at Bradley at the Coliseum a couple of times when they've had several hundred people at once that they register. And yes, we do the voter registration efforts for newly sworn in citizens. We do them at street fairs. We've been at Pride the last couple of years, registering voters. We go on National Voter Registration Day to ICC and to Bradley and to Spoon River College and have a table, because a lot of students think that, well, I've got to register at home. You're not obligated to. You spend 9 months out of your year
true.
going to college, and if you are a resident up at Bradley or Eureka College or ISU, you're able instead to transfer your registration there. A lot of students, once they get their first apartment or off-campus house, they'll absolutely come and register here because it matters to them what's happening in the city that they're living in.
I remember in college, I kind of did the opposite. I purposely stayed because I was from this small town of 200 people. And when there's 2 people running for mayor and there's 200 people that live in town, that election could very easily sway either direction.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. It makes perfect sense. You went where your vote counted the most in that election, and that's great. And it's a perfect reminder of why everybody should be registered to vote. And just to give you a handful of examples, in Peoria, in the last 6 or 7 years of Peoria elections, we have had multiple instances, including the mayoral race 5 years ago, where it came down to just a literal handful of votes that separated the candidates. And in fact, Raleigh in Peoria, the first time she ran for city council in, I believe it was 2017, she lost by 1 vote.
Really?
Yeah. If that is not proof positive that every single vote matters in these elections.
I've got that one friend sitting at home that's like, I wish I never went.
Yeah, I never registered, and since we're a couple of weeks out from the primary, before we talk about what the primary is and what some of the hot races are and everything else, I want to emphasize 2 things. It's absolutely every race your vote counts. The local races, as you've said, when there's so many fewer voters who come out for local races that affect your life on a daily basis from the minute you wake up until the minute you go to sleep, because it's where you live, where you shop, where you play, everything else. The local races matter the most. They tend to have some of the worst turnout. You can have a huge effect there. And primary elections, because they're not the whole ball of wax. Nobody's going to raise their right hand and be sworn in after a primary. One exception we can talk about. In most of those cases, turnout is much lower as well. In Peoria County, where we're recording, between 20 and 25%, one in 5 or 1 in 4 voters turns out for the primary elections in non-presidential years, like we're in right now. The last time we had a general primary, it was actually worse than that. It was about 15%. It was 18% in 2022, 20% in 2018. So these aren't great numbers you're looking at. So you can have a huge impact by going out and by exercising your right to vote and display what your choice is in that election. And by the way, those are percentages of registered voters.
Oh, okay.
So 1 in 5 registered voters is showing up. There's about Peoria County has we'll ballpark it at 138, 39,000 people over the age of 18
Oh,
who
okay.
would be eligible to vote. Like 20,000, 17 to 20,000 of those people are not registered at all to vote
Okay.
in the county. That's why the league continues to conduct these voter registration operations, is to encourage people register to vote while you can. We have so many new people who are coming in, whether it's to go to school here, to work at Caterpillar or the hospitals, or any one of the startups at Distillery or anywhere else. We have many people coming in who have to change their voter registration from their old state or their old city and become registered to vote here for registration. There are multiple types. There is the general voter registration that you can do until several weeks before an election. You either fill out your paperwork in person, you can fill it out online and register, you can fill it out and bring it to the election commission office. Multiple ways to get registered until a few weeks ahead of time. Then that registration closes. Online voter registration continues for a little while. There's something called grace period voter registration that gets you into the pipeline. And Illinois actually even has what's called same day voter registration. You can show up to the polls, register then to vote, and yes, your material will be taken. You'll be given a provisional ballot to cast, and then after they fully process everything and make sure you're eligible, you're not accidentally or even on purpose voting in 2 spots, because they don't finalize the election until 2 weeks afterward. So they have the time to process your forms and make sure that you are 100% eligible before that vote is counted, but you can still get a ballot on election day. And Illinois requires that you register with identification to vote, and 2 forms of ID, and that can be anything from the passport, the birth certificate, the biggie ones, through a driver's license, student ID, a bill that's in your name sent to your home. You need to have 2 sources that you bring to the election commission or anywhere else you can register to demonstrate who you are, that you live in the jurisdiction, and that you're eligible to vote. And they confirm all of that as you get your registration, and you don't have to show ID when you go to the polls in Illinois.
After hearing all that, I guess it makes so much sense now why they always try to get you to register at the DMV.
Mm-hmm. Right, because they've already got
you have all that stuff with you.
Exactly.
It's there. It's it is a perfect time, isn't it?
And there's no question about any of it. They've got the computer in front of them right there with the database that will confirm anything else that people are shouting about now. Yes, you're a citizen. They can tell that when they're giving you your driver's license and everything else. So there is no question when you register that you are eligible. And that's why after that, when you show up at the polls, all you have to do is sign your name. And they match your signature to the one you provided when you registered.
Because you hear all these things, people talking about like voter ID, people on both sides are like, they need to show it, they don't need to show it. It sounds like they do their due diligence.
Yeah. Illinois makes them show voter ID. They just do it all the way back at the beginning of the process to make sure you're eligible. And they presume that after you're registered, you're going to remain the law-abiding citizen who's not cheating the system, because they've already proved you're the law-abiding citizen.
That you kind of covered a little bit, but I just keep thinking of this one little memory I have. I had this friend that had a boyfriend, and we're all voting for the president and talking about, like, if you don't vote for this person, you're voting for the other one, And he says, I will vote for the president the second you can prove to me that vote matters. And then I sat there and I was like, oh, wait. How do I prove to him? Because I wanted to prove it wrong. Like, how exactly do I prove? Because you think about how many people vote for the president, and then you look at certain elections like like Hillary Clinton winning the popular, and you're like,
right.
wait a minute, more Americans wanted her, stuff like that. Where
Well,
it's
and that's actually the perfect instance of this, regardless of party, is in the 2016 presidential election, and to a much lesser extent in the most recent presidential election. But it came down to a handful of states with several thousand votes that stood between one candidate winning that state and the other candidate winning that state. And regardless of your political leanings, because we're a nonpartisan organization, that proves just how few votes have to change in order for one person to win and one person to lose. And it's a reminder of why your vote matters. Everybody should be getting out there to vote. You're stuck with whoever it is who's elected for 4 years as president, for 2 years in Congress, for 6 years in the Senate, regardless of whether you vote or not. Well, why would you not want to have a say in who that person is who's making decisions for you?
And when you think about so in all history, I've always probably been able to vote. But when you think about like people of color, like they had restrictions even when they were allowed to vote. They made it very hard. Women and people that didn't own property, like something as simple as that. Like, I don't know, it almost feels, I don't want to say it's insulting not to vote, but it kind of feels like, oh my gosh, those people fought. They would have loved to. Or people living in countries that aren't the United States that, well, they have an election, but it's for one person, and it's just for fun.
Yeah. Well, and two things about that to think about, and I teach up at Bradley on the side in addition to my day job, and I'm teaching a political communication class right now.
Oh my gosh.
And we just talked about some of this by way of these issues, and I'm a historian and communicator by trade, so you think about the fact that when President Obama was elected, there were people alive who had grown up in the American South who did not have the right to vote or could not exercise their right to vote. They had been disenfranchised because they were Black. And in their lifetime, they went from not being allowed to register to seeing the first Black president elected.
Yeah, that makes it. There's like this video I see a lot of this lady that was like 112 years old that met Barack Obama and Michelle. And someone did like the timeline, like she was 45 years old when segregation ended.
Yeah.
And then she was able to go meet a Black president in the White House. Like, you realize how it really wasn't that long ago.
Right.
And I was looking at the years, I'm like, that's the year my mom was born.
Yeah. It's shocking how recent some of these things were. And again, since we're in Central Illinois for this, I would also point out, because you don't think of Illinois necessarily in this framework, and you certainly don't think of Central Illinois in this framework, but voting rights legislation was authored by two people. One of them grew up in Central Illinois in an almost completely all-white town, Everett Dirksen, who grew up in Pekin.
Oh, yeah.
And
historic sundown town, yeah.
Yeah, but he always supported civil rights legislation and voting rights legislation. He wrote the Civil Rights Act along with Hubert Humphrey from Minnesota, and the voting rights legislation. He was the key to getting votes on the Republican side of the aisle for helping pass that, because the Southern segregationists, who were Democrats in the 1960s, were the ones who weren't supporting it and were trying to block it in the Senate. So he's the one who rounded up Midwest Republicans from primarily white states, and with this continuing message of, we all deserve to be treated equally by the law. We all deserve access to these fundamental rights of citizens of the United States. And, to have that legacy in our own backyards here is another reminder for people from historically marginalized groups, one, of the importance of allies to help in the cause, but two, of why it is we all should exercise that right to vote, and why we need to be on the lookout for what is the next marginalized group that is not being granted a right of some kind. How do we stand up for them? How do we ensure that playing field remains an equal playing field?
I look at so much stuff literally, and I'm like, when you look at the Constitution of the United States, it literally says liberty and justice for all. It doesn't say some.
Right.
But they didn't mean that when they wrote it.
Mm-hmm.
They but like, oh, they're not going to mean those.
Yeah.
But we got to take it seriously now.
Right.
That's
100%.
that is the whole point. And we're about to celebrate 250 years. But like, how many rights? Like, okay, we said we were free here in 1776, but like, how
long did it take to actually become fully free?
What more do we have to do?
Right. And there's always more, because if we stop that push, we backslide. And right now there's legislation in Congress that the League is very concerned about. It's called the SAVE Act, and it would impose just a raft full of new restrictions on people's eligibility to go to the polls and vote. And at its core, first, it's a solution in search of a problem, which is to say there is not a meaningful problem. The Heritage Foundation, the people who brought Project 2025 into the current administration, if you look at the Heritage Foundation's database on voter fraud, and the Bipartisan Policy Center did, the Heritage Foundation can only document 77 cases of voter fraud from 1999 to 2023, at a point that literally billions of votes in the United States were cast over that 24-year period in local, state, and federal elections. They can only document 77 cases of voter fraud in that time. So one, we're not solving a real problem with this proposed legislation that would reduce the acceptable voter ID that people would be mandated to show at the polls to your passport, a driver's license, not even necessarily a driver's license, passport, birth certificate, naturalization papers.
There's so many people that can't afford a passport's like $145.
Right.
Like, not everyone has that disposable income.
No, it's not at all.
It's kind of a pain to go get a passport.
Right.
You gotta go to Walgreens and get your picture taken.
Yeah, and it's a whole multi-week process in order to get it back. I'm sure some people would say, oh, well, yeah, that's fair. Everybody all needs to be able to show a photo ID like that where we've checked everything else. There's 5 million Illinoisans out of 11,900,000, 5 million Illinoisans who don't have a passport. A lot of them can't afford it, are never going to use it to cross borders. 52% of Americans are in that boat of not having a passport. And not everybody can locate their birth certificate. And then there are other issues on top of that. You think of our friends who have birth certificates that show a different gender identity than now because of what was assigned to them at birth. How you overcome that with who you are now versus what your birth certificate says. And that's an excuse to disenfranchise people who have already had to go through a lot, by way of administrative process in their lives. Illinois makes it very easy to change your ID if you're a trans individual, but not all states are that easy to work with on identification. So finding your birth certificate, if you changed your name after marriage, if heaven help you, you changed your name after marriage, got divorced, and then got remarried. If you've got to tote along, and my wife was married prior to when we got together and divorced, and when she had to do updates on her driver's license, on her social security card, everything else, after she was toting around a file folder with her.
Yeah.
All of these bureaucratic appointments. What does it say to you if you have to tote around a file folder to exercise your right to vote a couple of times a year? Is that going to make you want to stand in line with all your valuable documents under your arm? Wait until you get in the cold of March and the cold of November? No. All that's doing, it is discouraging people or outright disenfranchising people from voting. And fortunately, it looks like there's not much appetite in the Senate for that. But the League is certainly encouraging people, call their senators in Illinois, tell them to stand firm on this. Don't let that come up for a vote. Block it any way they can, because all it will do is reduce the number of people who are able to vote.
You made me think of your guys', talking about being bipartisan, and that's just so important with like an organization like this where it's not because like I work with senior citizens mainly for my job, and I it's like so funny. I have this customer it's like I am a Republican, like he is like, but then like he's sitting there and he's like, oh, I really like JD Pritzker. Oh, I voted for Biden. Oh, I voted for Obama too. I'm like, are you just okay? You can say you're just you don't have a party.
You speak back and forth. That's okay.
There's like little things like I don't see it much here, but where I used to live, like the coroner is running as a Democrat. Why do I care if the coroner is a like Democrat or Republican?
Yeah,
I care more about like what you're like.
Right. Can you tell me how this person died, or
can you physically do this job?
Yeah, and a lot of states, including Illinois, have a legacy of that, where so many public offices where it doesn't matter. There aren't. It doesn't matter when you've passed away if you're a Republican or Democrat. What matters is, can they tell you the manner or the means of the death? Was this nefarious or not? That's what counts in those moments. To the great good credit of the Peoria area, not only do we see a lot of working back and forth across the aisle among our elected officials, we also see a lot of people who are going to treat the job seriously if they're elected, regardless of the party they're in these local, countywide positions. But yeah, for the most part, there's still the slicing and dicing of people in a partisan level, and that gets us back to why primary elections matter. It's your opportunity to find out about the candidates and cast a ballot for who you think is the best, most qualified candidate to go forward. Illinois does not require that you register as a member of one party and stay there until you file a change of registration form or anything. You can show up this year and pull a Democratic ballot and show up at the next election and ask for a Republican ballot, and it doesn't matter. There's no obligation to stay in the same party, and there's no obligation that pushes you into the other party either. You can vote your choice. Locally, you can also in the primary elections, you can ask for a nonpartisan ballot. There are some races that are fully nonpartisan. City council here is always a nonpartisan ballot. In actually in every community around here, except I believe Bartonville may still retain for the village board partisan elections. School board. School board is up for election in Peoria. You've probably seen the signs anytime you've driven around town. School board is an oddity. Peoria Public Schools Board it has 7 members on it. They elect at least one person every year onto that board, and it is always conducted as an election in the spring, whether that's the municipal election in April or whether it's the primary election typically held in March. That's always the general election. There's no primary. Everybody's on the ballot for school board, no matter what. So if you don't want to be a Republican or a Democrat and you live in Peoria, you can still ask for a nonpartisan ballot, and you'll just get the school board races for somebody who's going to serve a 5-year term. Which, it's an eternity of a sentence, but serve 5 years on the school board. And we do it in the spring because they take office on July 1st of every year for that 5-year term that they're elected to.
This sounds really bad, but at first when I remember voting, I was like, why do I care about the school board? Like, I don't have kids in school, I'm not in school. But then the second I started caring was when I got my property tax bill. And I was like, oh my gosh, I send a lot of money to District 150.
Yeah. Biggest item on anybody's property tax bill.
Like, okay,
anywhere.
Now who am I?
Who's
the best for these money?
Yeah. I mean, that's very important. And we all want qualified students graduating from the schools who have good opportunity, who are going to be able to have access to good jobs, to go on and do whatever they want after graduation. So we should care about the schools because they're our future coworkers, they're our future community members. We we should want the best for them.
Yeah, and I really, like, I want a kid that lives on the south side of Peoria to have the same exact opportunity as a kid living in Dunlap.
Exactly.
Like,
Yeah.
they need to have the same qualified teachers, the same facilities.
Yeah.
I don't even know if Peoria is good at that or not. I'll find out. but yeah, because where I grew up, there's only one school. There was no.
Well, right.
There's no, it
200.
doesn't matter. But now I'm like, living in a bigger city, it's like, God, just in one town, kids could have completely different
experiences between, you're right, Dunlap and in a different school district across the border, or Peoria Ridgewoods compared to Peoria High School compared to Manual, whole different experiences, and you want there to be some equity there.
Yeah. So, like, just to kind of like sum all this up, the election March 17th, am I right?
March 17th for the primary. Early voting is already underway, and you can go to the election commission for that and cast a ballot there now through the 16th, and they'll record they'll take it, they'll put it in, they don't count it until election day, but they'll mark that you voted, so you can't go and vote again. In Peoria County, we don't require you to go to your precinct. You can go to any voting station, any polling place in the county and vote. They'll pull your name up electronically and check you off, so you can go to the one that's closest to your work, or if you're visiting family that day or anything else. As long as it's in the county, you can do it anywhere. Illinois has vote by mail options that people can sign up for to request a mail-in ballot sent to your house. Got the return envelope and everything. Fill out the ballot, follow the instructions on how you seal it. You sign your name right on the seal so they can tell if it's been broken.
Okay.
And send it in. This is very important. The Postal Service has changed some of its policies in the last couple of years on this. They no longer postmark everything when they take it back to the collection center in Peoria. They put it on a truck, they send it to Champaign, they run it through a machine there. So it's not necessarily postmarked the day you put it in the big blue box.
Oh,
and that's a concern, because your mail-in ballot only counts if it is postmarked on or before election day.
Okay.
So for years we've had people who do it at the last minute. They put it in the blue box on election day afternoon, figuring, well, it'll get postmarked. Yeah, it's probably not getting postmarked till the 19th if you do that. So we have drop boxes at the election commission and a few other locations where you can submit your ballot into the drop box. There's cameras on it, so we can be sure nobody's breaking in and changing votes or anything like that. You can bring that completed envelope sealed back to the election commission, and they'll take it there. You can put it in the mail early. We suggest that everybody get mail-in ballots done by March 10.
Okay.
Be extra careful to make sure there's time for it to get that postmark.
Nice grace period.
Or you can walk into the post office and ask, "Will you postmark this, please?"
Oh, I didn't know they could do that.
Yeah, they're able to do that. On a busy day, they might not be wild about it, but if you go in there, they will be able to postmark it for you. So anyway, any one of those methods. But yes, primary is on March 17, and the primary is important. We'll be nominating candidates in both parties for United States Senator. First time in 30 years this U.S. Senate seat has been open. Dick Durbin is retiring as senator. Big opportunity there for candidates.
So a good reference for that, when I was a child.
Yeah, he was first elected. Yeah.
I'm 31. Like, I'm gonna let somebody else.
yeah. Well, and he's risen to the number 2 position in the Senate over that time. But yeah, he's retiring. We've got candidates from around the state who are running in both parties for that. We're choosing a nominee for governor in both parties, and then there's also some local and statewide races that have contested primaries on one side or the other.
And sort of my final question for you is, okay, this is make-believe. I'm 31 years old. I've never voted before. And the only thing I know what to do right now is walk in there and pick out the coolest name. So what is like a really good resource or place for me to start to kind of like decide who should I vote for? Who Like, is there a place that kind of compares or
Yeah.
resource for that?
So the league works with a group at vote411.com
Okay.
that sends out questionnaires to candidates in all of the races. And some of this is going to be local. There aren't just many local contested primaries, but at the statewide level, at the congressional level, for Senate, everything else, those questionnaires have gone out. You can go to vote411.com and find out what the candidates' responses have been to these questionnaires, depending on when this airs. Regardless of when it airs, on February 26th, WTVP, our local PBS station, is airing the only televised downstate U.S. Senate forum.
Oh, okay.
You can watch it on TVP, but at WTVP.org, you'll be able to stream both of those forums, the Republican one, the Democratic one, and be able to see how those candidates stack up, because whoever wins that election in November is going to be there for at least 6 years. That's a long time. You kind of want to know what those candidates
stand for. What can happen in 6 years, yeah.
And then League of Women Voters of Greater Peoria on YouTube. All of the candidate forums that we have conducted for contested races, including the school board one, we had 100 people show up in person for that forum. We've had 500-600 people who have viewed that live stream already and helping make up their mind. For school board, you can go there and hear what those candidates have to say about it. And to me, the important thing is to just remember that, and this is the league slogan, democracy is not a spectator sport.
Okay.
You have skin in the game in every way imaginable with these offices. So get registered, learn about the candidates at vote411.com, learn about them through the candidate forums at WTVP.org and on the League of Women Voters YouTube site, and then decide who you're going to vote for.
It's a lot better than just picking a cool name, which here is actually like a real thing.
It truly is. It truly is. And there are literally people who write in Mickey Mouse.
Oh my gosh.
For write-in positions on the ballot. You can ask, and the election commission will give you a list of what those write-ins were afterward.
People need to stop, because one day Mickey Mouse might get elected.
Weirder things have happened. Nevada has a none of the above choice.
Oh. Okay.
On their ballots. None of the above has won a few elections out there. And I understand that sometimes in some races with some candidates, but the majority of these races that are contested have qualified candidates, have candidates that are going to suit the points of view that people are bringing in. You just have to find out, which candidate do I think I agree with the most? And that's where being informed is important.
Wow. I feel like I've learned. I didn't realize how uninformed I was on some things, but you know what? That's why we're here. I hope lots of people listen to this podcast and learn a lot more as well.
I hope so. And we'll be sharing it through the league, too.
Well, thanks so much for coming on Inquiry, Chris. Is there any final notes you got? Or
just remember to go get registered and go vote.
Vote.
Absolutely.
Thanks for tuning in to Inquiry Teach-In Series, presented by Peoria Proud. If you're interested in presenting or have a topic you'd like us to consider, reach out on our website or social media. We'll see you next time.